Hello, I'm TN, Shadow Stories, and today I'm going to tell you about Jack, a teenager who faced a night of ultimate horror when a storm hit and his parents were stranded far from home. An eerie knocking at the door, chilling footsteps on the second floor, and then the appearance of a stranger who wouldn't utter a word. Who was he? What did he want? And why couldn't even the police explain what happened? Let's dive into a haunting ghost story about primal fear, unsolved mysteries, and a terrifying truth that will haunt you forever. Now, let's begin the tale. The incessant drumming of rain against the window pane was the only sound accompanying Jack, a 16-year-old, as he stared at the flickering news channel. His parents, Laura and David, were stuck in the city, an unexpected deluge having transformed rush hour into an impassable watery maze. "Stay safe, honey. We'll be home as soon as the roads clear up." His mom's voice, tinny and strained, echoed in his mind from their last call. Jack had nodded, a false bravado in his tone, assuring them he'd be fine. Now, at 7:41 p.m., alone in their secluded suburban home, the silence felt heavy, punctuated only by the storm's growing intensity. The house, a cozy two-story, usually felt like a sanctuary. Tonight, with the wind howling like a banshee and the rain lashing against every surface, it felt vast, almost cavernous. He tried to focus on his video game, but his concentration wavered. Every creak of the old house, every gust of wind rattling a loose shutter, made him jump. The faint glow from his phone screen was a small comfort in the encroaching gloom. He peered out the window, a nervous habit, but saw only a blurry watercolor of trees and saturated darkness. The streetlights had long since succumbed to the storm, plunging their quiet cul-de-sac into an inky blackness, save for the occasional flash of lightning that briefly illuminated the sodden world outside. As the clock crept past 9, the storm escalated. The wind howled with renewed ferocity, and the rain hammered against the roof with an almost malicious intent. Jack was curled on the sofa, a blanket pulled tight around him, trying to distract himself with an old movie. Then, just as the hero was about to deliver a crucial line, it came. A distinct, measured rap at the front door. Jack froze, his blood running cold. It wasn't the rattling of the wind, nor the creak of the house settling. It was undeniably a knock. His heart pounded against his ribs, a frantic drum in the sudden, eerie silence between thunderclaps. Who could possibly be at the door at 9:15 p.m. in this weather? His parents wouldn't knock. Neighbors knew to call. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Hello," he called out, his voice barely a whisper, swallowed by the storm. No answer. Only the relentless rain. Louder this time, but more insistent. A shiver traced its way down his spine. His breath hitched in his throat. He peered through the peephole, but saw only a swirling vortex of rain and darkness. His hand trembled as he reached for the doorknob. Every instinct screamed at him not to open it, to pretend he wasn't home. But a morbid curiosity, a desperate need to explain the inexplicable, compelled him forward. He slowly, cautiously, unlatched the deadbolt, the click echoing unnaturally loud in the quiet house. With a deep breath, he pulled the door open a crack, peering into the tempest. The wind immediately tried to rip the door from his grasp, tearing at his hair. He strained his eyes but saw nothing, just the unrelenting sheets of rain. He widened the gap, pushing against the wind, forcing himself to look further. Empty. The porch light, usually a comforting glow, was out, plunging the immediate area into near total darkness. A low growl of thunder rumbled overhead, making the ground vibrate beneath his feet. Disappointment mingled with a fresh wave of unease. He closed the door quickly, securing the lock with a click that sounded hollow in the vast emptiness of the house. He leaned against it, chest heaving. Just the wind, he tried to tell himself. A loose branch, perhaps. But as his gaze fell to the polished wood floor, a new wave of terror washed over him. There, just inside the threshold, clearly visible despite the dim light from the living room, were three distinct muddy footprints, large adult-sized prints, trailing in from the storm, stopping abruptly just beyond the doorframe. They were undeniably fresh, drops of water still beating around their edges. His mind raced. He hadn't stepped in mud. His parents hadn't been home. These weren't his, and they were right where he had stood, opening the door. A cold dread seeped into his bones, deeper than the chill of the storm. Someone had been there. Someone had knocked, and they had been right outside. He backed away slowly, his eyes wide and fixed on the muddy tracks, as if expecting the owner to materialize from the shadows. The air suddenly felt heavy, colder, even though the heating was on. He stumbled back to the sofa, pulling the blanket tighter, but it offered no warmth against the icy grip of fear that now enveloped him. The clock showed 10:42 p.m. The rain still hammered outside, but now it sounded different, like a million tiny whispers at the windows. Watching him, hours later, exhaustion finally claimed him. Despite the gnawing fear, the sheer mental and emotional toll of the night began to weigh him down. He must have drifted off sometime after midnight, slumped against the cushions of the sofa, the movie long forgotten. He woke abruptly, the world around him still shrouded in oppressive darkness. The rain had subsided to a steady drizzle, a softer, more insidious sound. His mouth was dry, his limbs stiff. The glowing numbers of the digital clock on the wall glared 12:21 a.m. He shifted, trying to shake off the lingering grogginess, when he heard it. A distinct sound, coming from directly above him, from the second floor, from his bedroom. Jack froze, every muscle in his body seizing up. His eyes darted around the dark living room, wide and unblinking. It wasn't the creaking of the old house. It was heavy. It was deliberate, like someone was walking, slowly, dragging their feet across the floorboards. His blood ran cold. His heart, which had just begun to slow its frantic rhythm, now hammered against his ribs with renewed ferocity. He held his breath, straining to hear over the pounding in his ears. Closer. It sounded like it was moving from the far end of the hallway, towards his bedroom door. A gasp hitched in his throat. He could almost feel the weight of each step, the friction of something being dragged. He knew that sound. It was the old, loose floorboard right outside his bedroom. He had fixed it himself just last month. A primal, bone-chilling terror coursed down his spine. This wasn't the wind. This wasn't his imagination. There was someone in his house, and they were upstairs, in his room. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He remembered the muddy footprints. They had gotten in. He scrambled off the sofa, his movements jerky and panicked. His mind was a chaotic blur of terror and a desperate urge to survive. His hands trembled violently. He didn't dare turn on any lights, fearing to draw attention to himself. The darkness, which had felt oppressive before, now felt like a fragile shield. The sound was directly over his head now, just above the living room ceiling. He could almost feel the vibrations. He knew he had to move. Now! He glanced frantically around, his eyes wild. The front door was too far, too exposed. The back door, through the kitchen, was equally risky. His gaze landed on the small guest bathroom off the main hallway. It was cramped, no window, but it had a lock, a place to hide. Without a second thought, Jack dashed for the bathroom. His bare feet slapped against the cold wood floor, a loud, terrifying sound in the otherwise dead silence. He fumbled for the doorknob, his fingers slick with sweat. He yanked it open, slipped inside, and slammed it shut, the sound echoing through the house like a gunshot. His heart hammered, threatening to burst from his chest. He immediately twisted the small thumb lock on the doorknob. Click. Not a very strong lock, but it was something. He leaned against the door, breathless, his face pale and clammy. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to control his ragged breathing. His entire body was shaking uncontrollably. He pulled his phone from his pocket, his hand still trembling so violently that the screen danced erratically in the darkness. The glowing numbers read 1:45 a.m. He swallowed hard, his throat feeling like sandpaper. This wasn't a nightmare. This was real. He shakily dialed 911. The phone felt heavy, alien in his clammy grip. The ringing tone sounded impossibly loud in the small, silent bathroom. 911, what's your emergency? A calm, distant voice answered. Hello, please, my house. Someone's in my house, Jack stammered, his voice cracking with fear, barely above a whisper. He pressed himself against the door, listening intently for any sound from outside, his eyes wide and fixed on the sliver of light under the door. He tried to speak faster, to get all the words out before they found him. Sir, please calm down. Can you give me your address? The dispatcher asked, her voice even professional. Jack forced himself to utter his address, his voice still shaky but clearer now. They're upstairs, I heard them. Footsteps dragging. He was almost sobbing, the sheer terror overwhelming him. Every second felt like an eternity. He kept glancing at the door, expecting to hear a creak, a groan, a knock. He was trapped, alone, waiting. The dispatcher assured him that officers were on their way. The wait was excruciating. He could hear his own frantic breathing, the blood pounding in his ears. He imagined the footsteps above him, creeping closer, listening for him. He imagined them outside the bathroom door, just inches away, waiting for him to make a sound. His eyes darted around the tiny, cramped space, seeing nothing but his own terrified reflection in the dark, tiled walls. He clutched his phone like a lifeline, the only connection to the outside world, to safety. Then he heard new sounds, distant at first, then growing louder. The unmistakable wail of police sirens. A wave of immense, shuddering relief washed over him, making his legs weak. He almost cried out, but clamped his hand over his mouth. He listened intently. The sirens grew closer, then seemed to stop abruptly. Footsteps outside the house, muffled voices, the faint crackle of walkie-talkies. He heard the front door open, then close. More footsteps, firm and deliberate, echoing through the silent house. They were inside. The police were here. He pressed his ear against the bathroom door, holding his breath, trying to decipher the sounds. He heard voices, low and authoritative, moving through the house. They seemed to be going upstairs. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he heard them coming back down. More voices, a new tone. Then a knock on his bathroom door. Jack flinched violently. A silent scream caught in his throat. He instinctively recoiled from the door. It's the police. Son, we're here. You can come out now. A calm, male voice, loud enough to be heard clearly, yet reassuring. Jack hesitated for a moment, his fear still paramount. Was it really them? He slowly, cautiously unlocked the door. His hand trembled as he pushed it open a crack, peering out. Two uniformed officers stood in the hallway, their faces serious but relief evident in their eyes. One held a flashlight, its beam sweeping across the floor. It's all right, son, one officer said, his voice gentle. Jack stumbled out, blinking in the sudden light, his legs wobbly. He looked around wildly, his eyes darting from one officer to the other. He was here upstairs. I heard him. The officers exchanged glances. We checked the whole house. Son, one began, his voice calm. Upstairs, downstairs, attic, basement. It's empty. No one here. Jack's jaw dropped. But the footsteps, the dragging, and he was at my door earlier, the footprints. He gestured frantically towards the front door. An officer walked to the front door, sweeping his flashlight over the wooden floor. No muddy footprints. The wood was clean and dry. It was as if they had never been there. Jack's heart sank. A cold, new kind of fear settled in his chest. We did find the back door ajar, another officer interjected, his voice matter-of-fact. "Looks like they might have slipped out that way when we arrived. No signs of forced entry, though. Probably just walked in through an unlocked door." "An unlocked door?" Jack stammered, bewildered. He was meticulous about locking up. He always was. The officers conducted a thorough search of the perimeter, sweeping flashlights across the muddy lawn, the overgrown garden of the abandoned house next door, and the surrounding trees. They found nothing. No footprints leading away, no discarded items, no sign of anyone having been there at all. 1:58 a.m. The police concluded their search. The intruder was gone, vanished as quickly and mysteriously as they had appeared. The officers offered him comfort, suggesting it was likely a transient seeking shelter from the storm who fled upon hearing the sirens. They advised him to be more careful with his locks and offered to have a patrol car keep an eye on the house for the rest of the night. But their words, meant to reassure, did little to soothe the terrifying chill that had settled deep within Jack's bones. He nodded numbly, watching them leave, their siren fading into the distant night. He was alone again, but this time, the silence was different. It was heavy with unanswered questions, with the chilling knowledge that someone had been in his home, had walked in his room, had dragged something across his floorboards, and then simply disappeared. Jack never knew who the man was. The police investigation yielded no suspects, no leads. The abandoned house next door remained empty and silent, its windows still dark and unseeing. But every time Jack looked at it or heard the wind creak through his own house, the echo of that eerie whistling, the slow, deliberate thump, drag of footsteps from above, sent shivers down his spine. The fear wasn't about a simple break-in. It was about the utter inexplicability of it all. A presence that manifested without reason, left no trace, and faded into nothingness. He was invaded not just by a stranger, but by an unsettling abnormality, a meaningless act that defied all logic. Years passed. Jack grew up, moved out, but the memory lingered. He would wake in cold sweats from nightmares of the faceless man, whistling his eerie tune in the dark. He often checked locks multiple times, a nervous habit he could never break. Every unexpected sound in the night, every creak in an old house, brought him back to that terrifying night. He understood then that this fear would haunt him for the rest of his life. It wasn't just a memory, it was a permanent scar on his soul, a chilling reminder that the world held horrors that couldn't be explained, couldn't be caught, and could vanish into silence, leaving only an echo in the dark. And so, we've reached the end of Jack's story and The Uninvited Guest. Quite a haunting conclusion. Wouldn't you agree? What do you all think about what happened that night? Was it just a stranger, or was something more terrifying at play? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to TN Shadow Stories so you don't miss our next chilling tales. See you in the next video.